Everyone, welcome to the show. I'm Hafsa, the host of Before the BFP, and today we have a great guest on, Bethany. Bethany, welcome to the show.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here.
We're so glad to have you. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Bethany, do you want to introduce yourself to our listeners?
Sure. My name is Bethany Meyers. I currently reside in Florida with my husband and my two kids who are almost 2.5 and 10 months old now. So that kind of gives you an insight to how the story ends. But we moved here from New York City about a year and a half ago, which was a pretty big change. So I still feel like we're all still adjusting. It kind of feels like we're still new, even though we're not all that new.
Not related at all to your story, but how is Florida compared to New York City?
It's awesome.
Really?
And I didn't expect that to be what I would say, but I think our lives have just so dramatically shifted since we've had children. And, it's warm weather all the time. And it's just like a good place to have your kids outside. And we've met great family and community. And that wasn't necessarily something that we were finding in New York after we had kids. So yeah, it's surprisingly been really, really great for us. We also have family that we're close to now, and we didn't have that in the city. So, of course, that makes a big difference. We have much more of a village.
I feel like the ultimate hack to having children is having grandparents that live nearby or family that
Wo-
lives nearby.
1,000,000%.
I'm super lucky. My mom lives 2 minutes down the road this way. My mother in law lives 2 minutes down the road this
Oh
way.
my
And my
God.
brother's in that room right there.
There you go. Amazing.
Bethany, do you want to jump into your story?
Sure. Oh, it's such a wild story. And I'm going to give the unabridged version today,
I'm
which
excited to hear it.
I don't normally do. I've only told it once in full publicly because it's wild. But yeah, I'm excited to get to talk today because anyone who's experienced infertility, it's the hardest thing in my life that I've ever gone through. And then there's hope, coming out the other side. So my partner and I have known each other since we were 18 and 20 years old, and we weren't necessarily together all of that time, but we were definitely always each other's emergency contacts, like
Yeah.
even when we weren't talking, like that was the person that you were calling. We've kind of been everything under the sun. We've been best friends, we've been partners, we've been in an open relationship with each other. We've been like, we've explored all of the different ways that there possibly is to explore. And one thing that we always came back to was the fact that we wanted to have a family with one another. I think like having kids together or seeing the other person as the parent of our children always felt right, no matter what situation we were in. So after we had known each other for 12 years, we got married. And then it was another 5 years before we decided to start trying. So again, we lived in New York City and people aren't necessarily having kids in their 20s or even in their early 30s at that, like nobody's having kids young. Everybody waits, which is funny because in New York, I felt like I was a young mom, and in Florida, an old mom. It's like very different ages. So when I was 34 is when we decided to start trying. And because we had always had kind of this spiritual aspect with each other of having kids, like we knew that we were destined to have a family. It was such like a deep lying thread that I felt like we are going to get pregnant immediately. And we did not. And it was really, really surprising. And I actually I mean, it's silly to think about, but from the very first month that we tried, when I got my period, I was really upset. Like I started crying. And of course, I mean, most people don't get pregnant on the first try, but I just thought we most certainly would. And I remember being like very shocked and confused when I saw my period. And so it was like, okay, now, we'll try again and we'll try again. And at 6 months of us trying to conceive was also when I turned 35. And that really, I just remember that time as being like so it was just when it felt really big and really hard and really scary. And I think that's because, number one, if you're doing any type of research online, 35 is a very scary age. The way online,
Geriatric.
yes,
That's the
it
word.
it makes it look like you hit 35 and all of your eggs are gone, which we know is not the case, right? And I think it's really important for people to understand that, like, these are numbers and statistics, and it's talking about, like, maybe certain things begin to decrease, but it's not like there's this sudden drop off of, like, your viability to get pregnant. But it was a really scary time. One, we had been trying for 6 months. So that was also another marker. Like, once you've been trying for 6 months, if you're over 35, then it's time to seek outside help. It was just like a lot of things at once. And I had this experience when we were trying to conceive 3 separate times. The day I started my period, I encountered a dead bird on our property.
I got chills.
And when you actually look up dead birds, they are good omens, not bad omens.
Yeah.
But it didn't feel that way. So I would, like, start my period, walk outside and find a dead bird. And it was just like, it was a lot. I remember having this breakdown and crying so deeply. My husband was kind of like, "We've only been trying for 6 months. It's okay. Like, we'll figure it out." But I think in retrospect, I was, like, crying for the future of what would be and for the next year and a half to come before we would eventually conceive. So at that 6 month marker, we decided to start talking to someone and seeing what was going on. And I really wanted to go more of a natural route. I'm much more, like, holistically minded even now than I was then. But I really, like, the thought of being in any type of fertility clinic was, like, super foreign. And again, I thought I would get pregnant immediately. So it felt like that's not for me. That's not my life. That's not my journey. So we found a midwife who was very experienced in New York, who was the person that would, you know, test my blood and all of our levels and, just kind of start testing AMH and all of these things. Everything came back with flying colors. And in one sense, that's super encouraging. But for anyone who has undiagnosed infertility, it's also very frustrating because you can't, like, find the thing, right? You can't be like, okay, it's this. And so therefore, I'm going to work on this.
Yeah.
And I think because we didn't know what the hang up was, it really felt like it was my fault. And I just constantly felt like I'm not having sex at the right time. And I don't understand ovulation. And, like, I need to be tracking more. And then, we started doing the ovulation strips, and they're
Not very
really
good.
not, no, they're not very good. Like, they're not very cut and dry. I will say that I do think, like, the clear blue with the happy face is the best one that's out there. Like, it was much harder to read than I thought. And the whole thing just seemed very confusing. And now I am so much more in touch with my cycle. I thought I was very in touch with my cycle, but I feel like I'm able to identify my fertile window so much easier than at that time. But yeah, it was just a really confusing process and very frustrating and very sad. So we continued to try. It continued not to happen. Sex really became a chore. The fun got out of it. It just was like, and then you're talking to people and everybody's like, just go on a vacation, just relax, just forget about it. It's just the worst advice, the worst thing that you want to hear. And it was just like a really, really dark time. And my husband and I, because so much of the foundation of our marriage was because of this idea that we wanted to have a family. Like, when we decided to get married, we weren't even dating per se. Like, we were best friends. We'd had this crazy ayahuasca journey in Peru, and we were like, oh,
That's
we're meant to
cool.
get married. And, like, and we decided to get married. We weren't even living together. So the kids were like such a foundation. And we had this moment where, like, I felt like I needed to think about the worst case scenario. I'm getting emotional right now. I needed to think about what the quote worst case scenario would look like for us. And my husband was more the type that was like, we need to stay positive and only manifest positive things. So he didn't want to jump into the worst case scenario. And I really felt like I needed to. And I remember us having this conversation one day where I was like, what if it doesn't happen? And he looked at me and he was like, if it doesn't happen, it's going to be really hard for us. And the way that he said it was like, I felt more dire. It was like,
Yeah.
it's going to be really hard for our relationship to succeed. And I knew that deep down because we both so desperately wanted kids. And it was like the thing that I didn't want to hear, but the thing that I desperately needed to hear, like almost had to like say it and really lay it out. So we decided that we would go to a fertility clinic. I was really over like waiting. When we had decided to start trying, I wanted kids like right then, right? Like that was my timeline. I was like, I want my first baby at 35. So we'll start at 34. Like it was like all laid out. And I started to really feel like time was slipping. This timeline that I had prepared for and I had planned for was suddenly falling through my fingertips. So we had a friend who had gotten pregnant at 45 and had a baby with this doctor that was at Columbia Fertility in the city. I'm a really big fan of Columbia Fertility. If anybody is in
Yeah.
New York City, I think they're a fantastic clinic. And I call him and they're like, there's a 4-month wait list. I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, why does everything take so long in this process? Right. But we went ahead and we got on the list and we ended up seeing him in October of 2021. So now we have been trying for a year and we got in and they, do all the testing, they do all the things. And he's like, okay, I think that we should start with doing IUI cycles. We talked about the idea of IVF. I really didn't want to do IVF, and IUI was where we were going to start. And so, for anyone who doesn't know, IUI is intrauterine insemination, I think is what it stands for. So basically, they kind of take care of all of the timing, right? They're like tracking your cycle. You can do a medicated version or an unmedicated version. I chose mostly unmedicated aside from like the trigger shot. They're tracking when your ovulation is. I guess I didn't do unmedicated because I took Clomid. Anyway, so
Yeah.
we get ready for the first cycle. It was the first time that I'd ever used a needle on myself. Like that was very scary. I have a needle phobia. And our first cycle, we did not get pregnant. And so then we're going in for our second one. And it was in December and it was Christmas Eve that we took a pregnancy test and I was pregnant and it was like snowing outside and it was Christmas Eve and we were like that it was like the most like movie picturesque perfect okay, we did it. Like we're pregnant. And I just remember feeling so relieved, so happy, and so much like everything was a fluke. Like that whole situation, everything that happened was just totally a fluke. And very much like that wasn't me. That wasn't part of my experience. I just want to shake that off and thank God I never have to deal with that again. Like, ew, what was that kind of
Yeah.
thing? Like, I didn't really feel very connected to that being a part of my story or a part of my experience. The next day was Christmas, obviously. And we told all of our family, like my mom was on FaceTime. I did like a Wheel of Fortune style, like paper on the wall. She had to like guess the letters or whatever.
Oh,
My
that's
mom's
so
very
cute.
good at like puzzles. So it was, It's a Christmas Miracle was what like we put on there. And, she guessed it and she started crying. And it was just like all of the things that you want when you tell someone that you're pregnant. And I remember calling the clinic and telling them, and the doctor said something like, "Okay, well, let's come in and we'll see like how everything look." Or I don't know. The way that he said it was like, and so the doctor kind of said something like, "Okay, well, we'll come in and we'll check your levels," or like not something that's that weird for him to say, but I remember when he said it, thinking wait, do you think that this could not be real? Kind of, I asked him, I was like, do you think I'm not pregnant? He's like, no, no, we'll check your levels. So we went in for the first check, and at that point, it was just blood work and what's the one that you want to double
Beta?
every
Your
time?
betas? H
Yeah, HCG. Yes, my HCG had doubled. Everything looked great. I think I was only like 5 weeks at that point. So then we were going to come in again at 7 for a heartbeat. And we went in, and I was so excited. And as soon as he started the scan, um, it was very clear that he wasn't happy, and he was like, I ended up with a blighted ovum, I believe is what it's called. There was no yolk sac, and there was no heartbeat. And I knew, right? He was like, well, maybe we have the timing wrong. Like, we could come in another week and see. But I knew right away that it wasn't going to be a viable pregnancy. I always struggle when I talk about this part because the way that I felt during that time was so heartbroken, and it was deep, deep grief and deep pain. But I always find myself wanting to apologize for the fact that it was such an early loss, because I know that there are people who experience loss much later in pregnancy, and it has to have such different implications. And then I also want to say that I think whatever feeling that you have when you're experiencing pregnancy loss is so valid. Like, the feelings that were there were so valid, even though it was such an early loss. And yet, still, when I tell the story, like, I feel so guilty that I felt that I had such a hard time with a loss that was so early. So, I guess I'm saying this to myself and to other people listening: a loss, when you really, really want it, is really, really hard. And it felt like I was just never going to get this thing that I wanted so bad. Like, it was just, we had been trying and trying and trying, and everything was just stripped away. It was like given to me and then stripped away. And it was just like, this is never going to happen. And you're in this cycle of trying, going to the doctor and doing it. It's so taxing. And it's also so long. And I think that's the thing that I never realized before stepping into this journey, is just how every single, you get one shot a month to try for this thing that you want so bad. And the joy was just stripped away. And I remember, like, at this time, kind of being like talking to people, or like reading the book Spirit Babies. Everybody told me to read Spirit Babies. And I think that book has probably helped a lot of people. It did not help me at all, because I was like reading it, and I was like, okay, how do I find this person that can talk to my spirit baby to tell me exactly when they're supposed to come? Like, the CEO version of me, the type A version of me, like, really wanted to have it all laid out, which of course, right, is the lesson. Like, I was getting lessons in parenthood before I was ever a parent, of letting go of control. I can remember people telling me, like, oh, you just have to surrender. Like, you just have to surrender to the process. And like, one day going outside on my porch and being like, I surrender. I surrender. Like, here I am. I've surrendered. Like, get me pregnant now. After we kind of got through the initial shock of the fact that we had lost the pregnancy, in ways, there was a little bit of relief, because I had a break from this, month over month cycle that we were doing. I really didn't want to have a DNC, and I didn't want to take the abortion pill, misoprostol, or I didn't want to
something
take
like that.
whatever
Yeah.
the pill would be that you would need to take. I just wanted to let it happen on my own. So I waited for a very long time. It was kind of cool, because I had reached out to a lot of, I had knew I wanted to have a home birth. So when I found out I was pregnant, like, right away, I was reaching out to all the midwives in the area. And the day that I found out about the miscarriage, I was supposed to have an appointment, like, the next day, with like a meet and greet with a midwife, who, by the way, would later go on to deliver my daughter.
That's amazing.
So it was cool because I had wrote her and then I had to be like, this just happened. And she wrote me back. She wrote me back this like long, beautiful, heartfelt email. And she gave me all these natural remedies if I was interested in them, some different herbs that I could do and, things that I could try to take. Like, without ever having met me, without ever getting a dollar from me, like, she really supported me, I think, more than she ever knew during that time. And then later, again, she ended up being my midwife. It was just really cool. So I started to do all of the natural things and, just try to let my body pass. But it was about 5 weeks is how long I think I waited. My fertility doctor wanted to get things moving, and they kind of kept calling to ask when I was going to schedule a DNC or what I wanted to do. And finally I told him, I was like, I really need you guys to lay off me and just give me some space and let me figure this out. And they were so respectful of that. And he was like, for sure, like, you let me know, listen to your body kind of thing, which was awesome. And so I waited as long as I could, but I started to hit this point where my body felt like a coffin. And I felt really like in this in between space that was just, I couldn't move on. I needed to be able to move on. And it was really uncomfortable. So I decided to have a DNC, which was a really hard decision for me to make. The day before I had it, I started to almost like kind of looked like bloody show, like just like a brown mucus. And I was like, what does this mean? I'm not supposed to do it. And I remember talking to my therapist and she was like, maybe this is just your sign that you are supposed to do it. Maybe it's your body being like, I am ready. This is the go ahead. You can go in. And so I went ahead with the DNC. I think it was a really good decision for me to just be able to move on. But my recovery from the DN was horrible.
Really?
It kind of simulated now what I definitely feel like I didn't know what labor felt like at the time, but I had contractions every 4 minutes. My uterus was contracting. It was really painful. It was a lot of blood. I went in, there wasn't anything wrong, but just it was really tough for me. And I know it's not necessarily that way for everyone, but it was kind of something to I wish I would have known that it could be super painful in recovery because I was not prepared at all for that.
This is the first time I've ever heard that it could be painful. I thought it was just like a not a simple procedure because it's so mentally taxing, but physically I thought it was okay, like less invasive.
Me too. Yeah. And it was it was so painful that I went into I was moaning through contractions. It
Wow.
was very painful. That being said, I also have the most sensitive body on earth, so it's not that strange for me. Um, so after this, I was on board now for IVF. And that was a really big shift and also a really big surprise for me. I didn't think that I didn't ever want to do IVF. Just the entire process sounded horrible. And I think also I had a lot of stigma surrounding IVF, I was like, I'm not that person. It I am fertile, this
Yeah.
idea of not being super fertile was really hard for me to wrap my head around. I was like, what is wrapped up in that, right? So deep rooted about that piece, about my womanhood, about being able to conceive, about connecting with this part of my womb, about doing this thing that we're supposed to be able to do or something. It really felt like a piece of me was missing and now I needed help. But I also was so done. I didn't want to have another miscarriage. And not that you can't miscarry, right, when you do IVF, but there's things that we could do that would help, right? We could genetically test the embryos, we could time things, we could try to mitigate some of it. And it was the first time that IVF, okay, maybe that sounds appealing. Let's just put it in the hands totally of someone else. So we decided that we were going to do an IVF cycle. And I started to get the medicines. Actually, when we went to go pick up the medicine, it was Mother's Day. And I remember going into the pharmacy, which there's like this one pharmacy in New York City, like all the way on the upper east side that you have to go to. So like go to this pharmacy and they're like, okay, that'll be $2,786. And I was like, what? Like our insurance didn't cover IVF, which is a whole other,
Insurance.
horrible. Like our insurance is great in so many ways, but not for having kids, which is really a shame. And so we got all these medicines and all of these needles and like all of these things. I was terrified to do the needles. And I think the fear was two things. The fear was like, also, I'm going down this process of IVF that I didn't really want to be doing. Here we are. Now I'm doing it. And then just like the fear of needles itself. My husband was out of town the first day we had to start. My best friend came over and she like did the needles for me. Like, there is a lot involved in that process. Just even timing and keeping track of everything and, all the different medicines, the different needle. Like it's intense. It's a very intense process. So this is where the story gets wild. We're on day like 8 of 10, maybe. Okay. So we're right at the end. And my husband, one morning, I wake up and he has like hives all over his stomach and all over his torso. And I'm like, what is going on? Like, you have hives all over you. And he's like, I don't know. Like, I feel fine, whatever. He's an actor. He goes to work. He's on set. This is still like COVID times, very careful. And he starts to get um, a fever. And so they bring in the doctor to test him for COVID. And a COVID test comes back negative, and they're like, okay, I guess you can finish out the day, but it's weird. They He goes to work the next day. I think I have this timing about right, but whatever, I'll skim through. He goes into work the next day and he still has this fever. Oh, the doctor that was originally supposed to come see him couldn't come because he had COVID. And so nobody actually saw him, but my husband's still feeling sick and has a sore throat and like very strange symptoms along with this hive rash. So they end up sending him out to a doctor, do whatever he needed to do. And I'm not really thinking anything of it. And I get a call from my husband and he's like, I don't really know how to say this. This is like 2 days before my egg retrieval. Okay. So I am hormonally like off the charts crazy. Because I don't really know how to say this, but the doctor just told me that I have syphilis. I know that anyone listening is like, oh, so your husband was cheating on you this whole time. Like that is what it sounds like. And I get it. But the thing is that my husband and I have always had a very interesting relationship, as I kind of alluded to before, where we have been open at several different points in our relationship. However, it was 20, all of this started. And so neither one of us were seeing anyone else. And furthermore, like the bigger point of the story is that he would never have to cheat on me. He could just tell me if he wanted to go and do something. Like it is not even a question. And I'm like, how is this even possible? He's like, I have no idea. So now, and looking back, it is almost comical. In the moment, it was not comical at all. But now we are like having to call our fertility doctor on like day 8 and be like, yeah, my husband has syphilis. Like, we're not really sure what to do at this point. So what happens is once you do the egg retrieval, they were going to take a fresh sperm sample then, right? Clean it and use the fresh sperm sample. We didn't have any sperm frozen. And syphilis and babies is a really, really big deal. Like it's extreme birth defects for children if you have syphilis. So the doctor is like, I don't even know what to do with this case. I've never come across this. I need to go and like talk to some other people. So our doctor is now like calling the top syphilis doctors in the country to be like, what do I do with this random case of people who have come in? It was so horrible and so mortifying. And like my doctor is like emailing my husband on the side and being like, listen, just between you and me, like, what's going on here? And my husband's like, I promise you there's nothing going on. So now we actually get connected with the top syphilis doctors in the country to also just figure out, like, how did you contract this? How do you have, just so we can like mitigate anything else, right?
Yeah.
What's crazy is when we went to the fertility clinic, we got full panels of like they check your blood for everything, any type of disease, full panels for STDs, and both of us were clean. So, long story short, after having talks with this doctor, what is believed to have happened? My husband was filming something where there was a heavy makeout scene that he had to do while he was sick. The doctor was like, it is very, very rare. However, syphilis can be contracted if you have a laceration in your throat and you are doing like heavy making out with someone else. Like it actually can be contracted through making out, which sounds so crazy and wild. And I know that
No, it sounds scary because now it's like, I don't wanna make
it's
out with anyone.
well, this whole entire time, I'm like, these doctors have to think like I am just a wife that's like, no, no, my husband would never, like, they have to be rolling their eyes behind the scenes. And I remember looking at him and being like, this, like, it's been 2020. Like, we've been together every single night. Like, there's no other way that this could have happened. Anyway, somehow he contracted syphilis in the middle of my IVF cycle, which then put everything on pause. And you know, when you're like trying to conceive, like it already feels like it's so long and drawn out. You know, it's the 4-month wait to see the doctor. Like it's just the longest process already that it's like, how can it possibly be any longer? But the doctor said we needed to do a 2-month hold. Both of us needed to go get penicillin shots, which was also not fun. I went ahead and got a penicillin shot, but I actually never contracted it, which was crazy because we were obviously still trying to conceive during this time. And penicillin knocks it out like in a day. Like it clears it up, I think like within 2 weeks or something. So we now needed to wait 2 months before we would do a sperm sample and then make embryos was our new plan. So now we had this like 2-month break. I was livid. I was so mad. I was like, who the hell contracts syphilis in the middle of their wife's IVF cycle, like all the things. I went ahead, I did my egg retrieval.
Sorry.
I went ahead and did the egg retrieval, got a dozen eggs, which is like nothing over the top, but I was very happy that we got these eggs. And then we had this 2-month break. So now my eggs had to be frozen, which I was also disappointed about because freezing eggs alone is not as viable as freezing embryos. Like it's stronger if you freeze an embryo than if you just freeze an egg. So I was really disappointed about that. It ended up working out. We didn't lose any eggs in the freezing process, which was very much a blessing. But what's cool about this story is where it gets exciting is we now had this 2-month break and I was like, we're still trying during this 2-month break. Like I was not chill about it in any way, shape, or form. Actually, my husband was now working 2 hours away during the next time that I was ovulating. And I was like, we're not messing around this time. Like, I am just going to come to you every other day. I'm going to drive 2.5 hours every other day. We're going to have sex. Like, we're going to still do this thing. And that is exactly what I did. And we got pregnant without any medical intervention after trying for almost 2 years during our syphilis break.
So funny, syphilis break.
And I'm like, when my daughter's older, I'm going to be like, you actually came to us because of syphilis. Like, it's also funny. My husband's grandma's name, who passed away, he was very, very close to her name is Phyllis. And she was,
Sorry.
yeah, no, her name was Phyllis. And she was also like, just, I'm saying this with the most love and in the best way, just like this asshole of a woman, just this Italian, Sicilian, like hard grandma. And so we always laughed that like Phyllis was, somewhere behind the scenes, like making sure that this is how we got our daughter. I don't know. So we did get pregnant again on our own during this cycle. And a lot of times when I tell this story, people will be like, "Oh, you got pregnant because like you finally took this break from IVF." Like,
Doesn't sound
you
like you
know,
took a
and
break.
exactly. And that's why I'm always very clear about the fact that I was like not chill about it. It was still every other day, like because people really make it sound like when you just relax, you get pregnant. And I have such a hard time with that advice. And I know anyone trying to conceive has a hard time with that type of advice. And like, sure, it can be good to try to do things to get yourself to relax or to focus on meditation or like to do, whatever you need to do to get you through. However, people have been getting pregnant during stressful times since the beginning of time. People have gotten pregnant in war and in famine and like in all of these different very, very difficult situations. So the idea that you just need to relax, I think it puts an unnecessary pressure on the person who is trying to conceive that just like isn't fair and kind of makes us feel like it's our fault. And, we got pregnant during the break, but nothing was chill about it at all. And I really do just believe that that was our daughter. And knowing her now, she's 2.5. It's so her. Like to make this like grand entrance or to like make it wait or to be particular. Like there's something that is so about her personality. And it feels special now that that's when she decided to come. And then the other cool thing was that we still went ahead with our process of freezing embryos, which felt very comforting. So once we were syphilis clear, we went ahead with the process of IVF. So we ended up with 4 genetically viable embryos that we actually still have frozen,
That's awesome.
which is, yeah, very comforting because I'm now 39 and we still want more children. Um, that was kind of her story. And I'll just share a little bit about kind of the next piece of our second baby. I was really worried about, the next time that we would conceive. We started trying a little earlier than maybe I thought we would. We were moving to Florida during this time. So the month before we moved, we went to our IVF clinic again and we were like, let's just try a cycle of IUI before we leave. Then we'll go to Florida. We'll try until this date, and then we'll use one of our embryos if we need it.
Mhm.
Um, and we ended up not getting pregnant on the IUI cycle. And then a few weeks later, we moved to Florida. The day we got to Florida, we got pregnant
That's
with our
crazy.
second child. Which is also like so his personality of just like, I'm here, I'm in the right spot, like so laid back. But it was such a blessing because, of course, you never know. And secondary infertility, I think you said that that's something that you're experiencing. It certainly happens. And now we're gearing up to think about baby number 3. And I think once you've experienced it, the fear never goes away, And even when I got pregnant with my second child, I was so terrified that I was going to have a miscarriage. It just robs you of that joy. I think that that's something that people don't really realize about infertility in general is how hard subsequent pregnancies or subsequent trying is because it is trauma that's stored in the body and it stays with you for a very long time, the good pieces and the bad pieces. And so I feel really lucky and super blessed to have my 2 kids, and I hope that we're able to have more. Yeah, I guess that's kind of the main bulk of the story.
When you found out you were pregnant with your daughter, were you afraid of another loss?
I was so terrified I didn't even get excited when I found out I was pregnant with her. It was around 4th of July. I did not think I was pregnant like at all, but we were going to have a 4th of July party and I wanted to know if I could drink. So I was like, I'm just going to take a pregnancy test. My husband and I had taken every single pregnancy test together.
That's amazing.
But that day I was certain I wasn't pregnant. So I woke up early and I had to pee. And, I wanted to use the very first pee of the day because maybe if you use your second pee, it didn't pick it up. And then you got to try again, like all the things.
Yeah.
So I went downstairs. I'm like half asleep. I take a pregnancy test and I kind of looking at it. It's not going to be positive. I set it aside. I'm again super, super tired. And then I pick it up to throw it in the trash. And that's when I saw the second line. And then I was like, my husband's not here. Like I went pounding up the stairs. He thought that someone had broken into the house because it was so early in the morning and he was still sleeping. He jumps up. He's like, what? What? And I was like, hyperventilating, holding this test in hand. And he starts screaming. I start screaming and we start hugging. And then immediately I started crying because I was like, I can't do this again. I can't go through this piece again. I remember when we were going in for the same scan for the heartbeat that we had found out that we lost our baby the first time. I felt paralyzed, like I couldn't move. And I just kept telling myself, like, all I have to do is get my body to the bus. And then, like, all I have to do is get my body onto the train. And all I have to do is walk through the front door. Like, I couldn't process anymore of like, all I have to do is get through the test and like hear the heartbeat. I could like only process getting one foot in front of the other to get there. And I was very, very nervous the entire pregnancy. But, one thing I'll share that my therapist said to me is like, once we found out we were pregnant, I really had a hard time celebrating and I didn't want to tell any friends. I told my mom and I was like, don't get excited, but it was just like super dark cloud negative. And I remember my therapist being like, you could miscarry again. And if you do, it will be devastating. And you getting excited now isn't going to change how devastating it's going to be. And that was like the most honest, real, and comforting thing that I think that I had heard because it was just like, yeah, it's going to suck. It's going to suck whether you get excited now or whether you don't get excited now. Like it's going to be terrible. And I was like, you're right, and that kind of helped me tell other people and get to a point where I was like, you only have what you have, and kind of we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But I do think that like with infertility and the process of trying to conceive, that honesty for me was really, really helpful. And our cousins also struggled to conceive. And I'll never forget one thing that she told me. And she was like, it sucks until one day it doesn't. And I was like, that is exactly it. Like, it is terrible until one day it's not terrible? So,
When did you stop, like, holding your breath about your pregnancy? When did you
when I
feel
had my baby.
Yeah, same. I keep asking this question thinking I'll get a different answer, and yeah, we all say the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly helps when you can feel movement. Now, I actually a lot of people don't recommend this, but it worked for me. I bought one of those little Dopplers for at home.
Me too.
And tons of people are like, don't, because you'll get obsessive over it. But I didn't get obsessive over it. I used it in moments where my anxiety was so high that I felt like that anxiety was worse for the baby than what I was doing. I would hear it, I would get a little heartbeat, and then I would put it away. And I only used it at times when I was just really, really in a dark place. And so that tool actually supported me. It supported me in my second pregnancy as well. And I certainly didn't like use it every day or nonstop or not be able to find the heartbeat. Like it never got out of control, but it was something that was helpful for me. And then, of course, being able to feel movement. And I felt like my daughter and I had kind of this cool relationship in the womb where I would be like, hey, I'm really freaking out. Like, if you could just move a little bit, it would be helpful for mommy. And she would always kind of like give me like a
Aw.
little tap back. And so that was kind of a way that we ended up developing this like sweet and special relationship then.
That's amazing. I used to go to my fertility clinic all the time and ask them for scans.
Yeah.
That was my favorite thing. I was like, "Thank you, like, you guys take all this money from me, but you at least let me." Like, do you know if you go to a normal OB, they'll see you when you're, like, 10 weeks pregnant,
Yes,
and then you get,
I
like, 1
know.
scan. My anxiety
Crazy.
no.
Off the charts.
Yeah.
Yeah, with her, I did the same thing. They let me stay with them until I was 10 weeks, and I went, like, twice a week, I mean, I just went all the time because I was so worried. And then actually when I got pregnant with my son, I was also worried, and I found a place in town that will do peace of mind ultrasounds.
Really?
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's this woman, like, she used to be a nurse. She now just, like, owns this, like, beautiful boutique, and she'll also do, like, 20-week scans and stuff, but they have, like, a special rate for it's called a peace of mind scan that you can go and get, and so I did one of those at the marker where we had had the miscarriage before just to kind of get myself through, and that was really helpful.
Yeah, it's so hard because you can't see inside your body and see what's going on, and, like, yeah, I had an anterior placenta, so I couldn't, like,
Ugh.
quite feel as much, and I could never find a heartbeat, so it was so stressful all the time.
So hard. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, that
So
makes a big difference.
so I have to look if we eventually get pregnant with this one, if there's a place that does peace of mind scans near us.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Worth
Yeah.
checking out.
Are there any resources that you would recommend? I'm guessing Spirit Babies is not one.
Well, everyone really likes that book, and I will tell you 100 people recommended it to me, so maybe it is great for some. My resources, there is a company now they didn't exist when I was going through it, but I have since connected with the people who founded it, and they are just, like, stand-up people. I've seen the products, and they're beautiful. It's called Dandy Fertility, Dandi. And what they've done is they've created products specifically for people who are going through IVF. So there's like a sticker that you can put on your body for like where the shot should go. There's
Wow,
a band that you can put around your body that you can like it can heat up or it can cool down. So you can like heat it before so the blood circulation goes and like cool it after. They just have like they made beautiful products to support the IVF process. And what I love about that is I was so squeamish about the needles. Like, do you have to purchase a band? No, absolutely not. But I was so squeamish about everything. I think I would have really liked something nice to like, it just feels like this extra hug. The other thing that they have is they have support groups with an actual nurse who is extremely knowledgeable, and you can schedule video calls with them the first time that you do your shot. So they'll walk you through everything. They
that's
have
awesome.
forums where you can like ask questions to other people. So I've been like in their WhatsApp group and people are like, this is what my numbers came back. This is blah, blah, blah. And they'll actually like answer questions for you. It's phenomenal, tons more information than maybe what you would normally get, from your clinic where you're kind of feeling like a number. So I really think Dandy Fertility is just, they're a great company. And I don't know if this is necessarily a resource, but something that I did when I was trying to conceive was I created like ritual around my menstrual cycle each month. And it was very, very helpful for me. I think when you get your period, it's so devastating and it's like it didn't work again. However, your period is also a signal that like everything is working and that life is still viable in your body. And like, our periods are how we are able to conceive. And so trying to keep some of that perspective I found helpful. So each period, like I personally, and this may be some people's jam and not, but I would wear period underwear and I would rinse them in a bowl. And then I would take the water and I would like pour it into the yard and I would say a prayer. Or I would like light a candle, or I would like just create some sort of ritual surrounding it. And I found that really helpful in like accepting my period coming each month and also like trying to find gratitude within the mess of the storm when like nothing felt very grateful.
I that sounds like a great idea because every time you see that blood, you're just like, "Not again."
It's such a gut punch,
Yeah.
So you almost have to like I felt like it was helpful for me, I should say, to find ways to reframe what that bleed meant.
Yeah. I will link Dandy down below in the show notes. So if anyone wants to find it, they can look it up. And Bethany, what is the best place that people can reach out to you if they want to connect?
Yeah, I'm pretty active on Instagram. I share a lot of realistic motherhood and some recipes and different things, but my Instagram handle is Bethany C. Myers, and I'd love to say hi to anybody there.
I have to make your cake. I saw your cake recipe and I'm not a baker, but I need to try it. It
I'm
looks so
telling you,
good.
I've worked so hard on figuring out that cake. I got to post my pie recipe because my pie is actually the thing that's the best.
Really? Don't tempt me. Awesome. I'll link that down below. So if anyone wants to reach out, they can. And Bethany, thanks so much for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. And to anyone out there who's in the thick of it, I see you and I'm excited for your bright days ahead because they're coming.
Yes, they're coming.